On the afternoon of March 31st, 2017, two adults, a child, and a dog were hiking the shoreline at Burnt Coat Head Park on the Nova Scotia side of the Bay of Fundy. They had come to see what the park is famous for, an ocean floor you can walk on. The tide was out. The rocks were exposed. It looked, for a few hours, like solid ground. Then it stopped looking that way. By the time the fire department got the call, the family was cut off, pinned against a rock face, with the water rising around them and no way back to the trail. A helicopter had to lift them out one at a time in harnesses while the tide kept climbing beneath their boots. The fire chief who ran the rescue said the water would have risen another 5 feet where they were standing. 5 feet. That's the difference between a story you tell at dinner and a story someone else tells about you. Hold that family in your mind. We will come back to them, because what happened to them is not an accident in the way we usually mean that word. It is what this bay does, on a schedule, twice a day, to anyone who reads the ground wrong. You know the Bay of Fundy, if you know it at all, as a postcard. Red cliffs, whales, strange sandstone towers with trees growing out of their heads, like something from a children's book. That is the version on the tourism website. The real bay is something else. It is a hydraulic machine that moves more water than any tide on Earth, and it does it so close to where people are standing that the gap between beautiful and fatal can be a matter of minutes. To understand why, you have to understand what makes this bay different from every other coastline on the planet. That difference is fatal. The Bay of Fundy is a funnel. It runs roughly 200 miles from its mouth in the open Atlantic to its narrow upper reaches between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and along that run, it gets progressively shallower and narrower, like a throat. Ordinary tides come from the gravitational pull of the moon and sun. In most of the world, that pull raises the sea a foot or two, and the coastline barely notices. In the Bay of Fundy, that same ordinary tidal pulse enters the funnel and has nowhere to go but UP. There is a phenomenon oceanographers call resonance. The bay is close to the exact length and depth needed to slosh back and forth in rhythm with the tide cycle itself, the way water sloshes higher and higher in a bathtub if you rock at just the right frequency. Fundy rocks at almost exactly that frequency. The result is not a tide. It is an amplifier. Twice a day, roughly 160 billion tons of seawater surge into this bay and back out again, more water than the combined flow of every freshwater river on Earth. At the upper end, near Hopewell Rocks and the Minas Basin, the difference between low tide and high tide can reach 16 meters, 52 feet. That is a 4-story building's worth of ocean, arriving and leaving every single day. On a clock the moon has been running since before there were people here to watch it. At low tide, that missing 52 feet of water leaves behind something that looks like an invitation, a flat, walkable ocean floor, stretching out for what can be more than 2 miles at spots like Shepady Bay. Sea stacks that towered over kayakers 6 hours earlier now sit on dry ground like sculptures in a park. You can walk underneath rock formations that were, at the exact same spot that morning, 40 feet underwater. It is one of the most photographed things in Atlantic Canada. It is also the exact terrain where the bay does its killing. There's a second consequence of that same funnel shape, one most visitors never think about until they're standing in the middle of it. The incoming tide doesn't arrive everywhere at once in a flat, even sheet. In the narrower reaches upstream, near Moncton and the Petitcodiac River, the returning water can arrive as a single advancing wall known as a tidal bore, a wave that runs against the natural current of the river and draws crowds who come specifically to watch it roll past. It's treated, correctly, as a spectacle. But the tidal bore is really just the visible edge of the same mechanism working everywhere else on the exposed flats, quietly, without the crowd and without the warning. Downstream, on the open mudflats where nobody's built bleachers, that same wall of returning water crosses open ground instead of a riverbed, and there's no wave to watch for, because by the time you'd see it, it would already be closing around your ankles. Here's the first thing almost nobody grasps standing on that exposed floor. It is not a beach. A beach is sand that has been there, dry, doing beach things, for a long time. What you are standing on at low tide in the Bay of Fundy is seabed. It has been underwater 12 hours ago and will be underwater again in a handful more. It has never had the chance to dry out, compact, and become the kind of ground your feet expect. In the upper bay, the exposed floor is largely fine silt and clay, washed down over thousands of years by the same tidal engine that exposes it. Rescue crews who work these mudflats describe the surface the same way, again and again. It can hold your weight standing still, and then, the moment you shift, it lets go underneath you like a trapdoor. It is not quicksand in the cartoon sense, sucking you under in one motion. It is worse in a specific way. It grips. The mud doesn't pull you down. It locks your legs in place while something else keeps moving. The tide. That combination, ground that can trap you, water that returns fast enough to drown you where you stand, and a shoreline where help may be a phone call and a 40-minute drive away, is the actual danger of the Bay of Fundy. It isn't a shark or a rogue wave or a cliff collapse, though the cliffs do collapse. It's simpler and stupider than any of that. It's a floor that used to be a ceiling for the ocean, twice a day, forever. Picture yourself at Hopewell Rocks, or one of the quieter flats further up the bay, 2 hours after low tide. The rock formations rise up around you like a forest turned to stone. There isn't another soul in sight, because most visitors keep to the marked staircases and the interpretive signs. And you wanted to see the far arch, the one in the photos nobody else gets. You walk out another 10 minutes. 15. The mud is a little softer than you expected, but it holds. Nothing about the first 20 minutes feels dangerous. The sky is the same sky it was on the postcard. The rocks are the same rocks. Nothing announces that a clock has started. But it has. Fundy's tide doesn't creep in the way a normal ocean tide does. In the upper bay, the incoming water can advance across the flats at a walking pace, and in the narrow channels that cut through the mud, faster than that. Those channels are the trap within the trap. They fill first, silently, behind you, cutting the path you walked in on before the main water line has even reached your feet. You don't see the tide coming in from the front, like a wave rolling up a beach. You see a channel that was dry when you crossed it 20 minutes ago, now running with moving water between you and the shore. This is the moment the ground reveals what it always was. Not a beach, a basin, temporarily off-duty. The instinct, at that point, is to run for the shore in a straight line. That instinct is what turns a scare into a rescue, and a rescue into the other thing. Running is exactly when the mud grips hardest. A running stride puts sudden, twisting weight through 1 foot at a time, which is precisely the kind of load that breaks the surface tension of saturated silt and lets your legs sink. People have gone into the knee in seconds, on ground that held their full weight walking a minute before. And once you're anchored, The tide doesn't wait for you to work yourself free. It has never once waited in the entire recorded history of this bay. Cell service along stretches of the Upper Fundy shore is inconsistent at best. Fire departments that respond to mudflat calls will tell you plainly that these are among the most resource-intensive rescues they run. Specialized equipment, sometimes an air-cushioned vehicle or a pump to liquefy the mud around a trapped limb, sometimes a helicopter, because a truck cannot cross the same ground a person got stuck in. Every minute spent assembling that response is a minute the tide does not spend waiting politely offshore. This is not a theory. It has names, it has dates, and the Bay of Fundy has produced more than one of them. On the 9th of July, 2016, a 26-year-old woman named Erin Handspiker was hiking Cape Split, the long finger of land where the Minas Basin meets the open bay, when her two dogs wandered a few feet off the trail and vanished over what looked like a small rise. She walked over to check on them, assumed they'd slid somewhere they couldn't climb back out of, and stepped over the edge to give them a nudge up. There was no edge to step onto. The ground had already been undermined by the same erosion the tides carve into every cliff on this coast, and it gave way the instant she put her weight on it. She fell nearly 90 meters, the better part of 300 feet, and survived only because she hit a dead tree partway down, which slowed her enough to land on a ledge instead of in the water. She doesn't remember the fall itself. What followed was, by the account of the rope rescuer who reached her, the hardest call of his career. A team rappelling down loose, unstable ground. Then a military cormorant helicopter brought in because the terrain was too broken for any ground vehicle to manage. She survived with a fractured collarbone, 8 fractured vertebrae, a fractured pelvis, and a broken wrist, and spent 5 days in the hospital. Her own words afterward: "It should have turned out much worse than it did." Her fall wasn't an isolated bad afternoon at that trailhead. It was one of 3 major rescues at Cape Split in the span of about 2 months that same year. Same cliffs, same undermined ground that looks solid until someone's weight finds the part that isn't. The province's own natural resources minister responded by promising more warning signs, which is a quiet admission that the signs already up there were never the thing standing between visitors and the drop. 9 years earlier, in the last days of December 1963, 2 brothers were fishing off Grand Manan Island at the mouth of the bay when their boat's carburetor froze solid in the cold and the engine died. They drifted for 12 hours as the wind climbed past 70 miles an hour until a swell finally threw the boat onto a strip of beach at the base of a 200-foot cliff, jagged, ice-slicked, with the Fundy tide already rising behind them. One of the brothers, Floyd Jones, made the climb up that crumbling rock face by hand and foothold, the tide chasing him the whole way, in what a rescue historian later documented as an act of last resort. Staying on that beach would have meant freezing or drowning as the water came back in, and climbing was the only version of that choice that had any odds attached to it at all. He made it. It's on record today precisely because of how easily it could have gone the other way. And this January, in 2026, the newest entry on a list that keeps adding entries, 2 women and a dog were caught out after dark near Amethyst Cove on the Cape Split Trail, unable to climb back up a 75-meter stretch they'd descended earlier on fixed ropes. It was winter. It was already night. The local fire chief said conditions made it too dangerous to launch his department's boat, so the call went out for a military helicopter instead, one built with a searchlight strong enough, in his own words, to make the cliffside look like daylight. They were flown out unhurt. But hold that sentence steady. A rescue at a well-known, staffed, signed hiking trail required a military aircraft, because by the time help was needed, every ground-based option had already been ruled out. 4 incidents. 60-some years apart at the far ends, 2 months apart at the near ones. Different causes on paper: a frozen carburetor, a crumbling trail edge, a family that stayed too long on an exposed shelf, 2 hikers who couldn't climb back out after dark. But every one of them happened on the same bay, driven by the same underlying fact. This coastline looks stable for exactly as long as the tide allows it to, and then it doesn't. And the people caught in that transition are almost never the reckless ones. They're hikers on a marked trail, a woman checking on her dogs, fishermen with engine trouble, a family taking in the view. That's the part that should unsettle you more than a dramatic storm story would. None of these required a storm. No fog, no equipment failure, no single dramatic villain moment, just ordinary people, ordinary caution, and a bay that had already started its clock before any of them knew it was running. The closest documented version of a straightforward tide drowning, someone caught flat-footed on open mud with the water arriving faster than help could, isn't from Fundy itself, but from the only other tidal system on Earth extreme enough to be mentioned in the same breath. Turnagain Arm, in Alaska, a close geometric cousin of Fundy, with the same funnel shape and the same silty, glacier-ground mud. On the evening of May 21st, 2023, a 20-year-old named Zachary Porter sank to his waist in flats near Hope on the Kenai Peninsula, 50 to 100 feet from shore. A friend called for help inside the first minute. The nearest fire department was 47 miles away. Bystanders dug and pulled and could not free him. 51 minutes after he got stuck, the tide reached him. A state trooper's spokesperson put it in words that could be printed on a sign at Hopewell Rocks without changing one of them. What looks like solid ground can turn into quicksand with little to no notice. Fundy's own upper mudflats are built from identical physics, on a schedule just as unforgiving, which is exactly why the tide tables posted at every access point along this bay are, in effect, the same warning written in advance. The Burnt Coat Head family survived because 3 things happened in their favor. Someone in the group, or someone who saw them, recognized the danger early enough to call for help before the situation became unrecoverable. The call went through, cell coverage held at that spot, which is not guaranteed everywhere on this coast. And a helicopter crew was close enough, and fast enough, to reach a cliff face with rising water beneath it, before the water finished the job the bay had started. The fire chief on scene put it as plainly as anyone could. It could have ended a lot worse. "Have great respect for that water," he said. "It can trap you. It comes in and around you." Every one of those 5 stories, Burnt Coat Head, Handspiker, the Grand Manon brothers, the 2 women at Amethyst Cove, and the drowning at Turnagain Arm that shows what happens when the luck runs out entirely, is the same lesson told a different way. A piece of luck, or the absence of one, layered on top of a decision that shouldn't have needed luck to survive. That is the real math underneath the postcard. Check the tide table before you walk, not after, for the exact site you're visiting, on the exact day, because Fundy's tide times shift daily and vary meaningfully between locations even within the same bay. Give yourself a hard turnaround time and treat it the way you'd treat a fuel gauge on a desert highway. Turn back while you still have margin, not when the water is already at your ankles. Stay near the marked access points and stairs, because those are placed exactly where the fastest, most direct path back to dry ground exists. Wandering to the better view spot often means wandering away from your own exit. Never treat a dry channel as a safe channel. If you crossed water on the way out, assume it will be deeper, not the same, on the way back. And if the mud ever grips past your ankle, stop moving your legs against it, because thrashing and twisting is what drives you deeper. Spread your weight, get low, and call for help immediately, rather than trying to walk yourself out. None of this is exotic advice. It is almost insultingly simple. That is exactly why so few people follow it. A rule that's simple doesn't feel like it's protecting you from anything real. Right up until the afternoon, it turns out to be the only rule that mattered. The Bay of Fundy does not hate the people who walk out onto its floor. It doesn't know they're there. That's the part people get backward. They imagine the tide as something hunting them, and it would almost be a comfort if it were, because a hunter can be outsmarted, avoided, reasoned with. The bay isn't hunting anyone. It is 160 billion tons of water moving on a rhythm set by the moon, a rhythm that predates every staircase, every interpretive sign, every visitor center gift shop built along its edge. It was doing this before Samuel de Champlain named the Upper Basin in 1604. It will be doing it long after every sign warning you about it has weathered to nothing. The rocks and the mudflats only feel like an invitation because you're seeing them during the one narrow window when the bay has temporarily stepped back. It is not giving you the ocean floor. It is lending it to you. On a schedule, it will not renegotiate, and it will take it back exactly on time whether or not you're still standing on it. Which brings us back to that family at Burnt Coat Head, harnessed one by one into a hovering helicopter while the water climbed the rock face behind them. They had done nothing reckless. They hadn't ignored a sign or crossed a barrier. They had simply misread how much time a beautiful, empty, ordinary-looking stretch of exposed seabed was actually going to give them. The same mistake made, in smaller and larger ways, by nearly everyone who has ever been caught out on this coast. The difference, that afternoon, was that the call went through, the chopper was close, and the tide was 5 feet short of finishing what it started. Most people who get that math wrong on ground like this don't get a helicopter. Some get a rope rescuer calling it the hardest job of his career. Some get a fire chief telling a reporter 5 feet was the margin. Some, on a different coast entirely, get a trooper's spokesperson, weeks later, still trying to put it into words. What looks like solid ground can turn into quicksand with little to no notice. Every version is the same lesson, arriving by a different rescue, on a different afternoon, at a different edge of the same idea. The ground that used to be ocean always would be again.